we make way for the Hall of Famer, John Smoltz, who was on the call, MLB on Fox last night. How you feeling, John?
Early morning back in Atlanta. I'm doing okay. I'm doing all right.
What was your expectation last night going into that game, starting with Paul Skenes?
Well, I was excited to see him live for the first time. I've watched him on film. Pittsburgh has probably the best pitcher they've ever had in a draft, and we all know they've had a lot of pitchers. There's a lot of pitchers in the rest of Major League Baseball that used to be with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and hopefully they can do something to keep him and do something to get in the postseason, because I don't say this very often about people, but he could throw all four-seam fastballs in a game. If let's just say that he couldn't throw anything but a fastball, and he could win a lot of big league baseball games. There's not many people. There's a handful of people that can do that. Jacob deGrom is one of them. I said that I wouldn't get caught up in the Steven Strasburg hysteria when I did his debut for the MLB Network, and I got caught up in it. It was electric. And I think this young man has the same capabilities. Now, my biggest wish and hope is that he stays healthy. But can you imagine, Pittsburgh hasn't been relevant for a while, and that's a team you don't want to play in a wild card scenario if they were to get in with their young pitching.
But, John, how does he avoid not getting hurt? I mean, your arm is built to only be able to do so many things at so many angles for such a certain amount of time.
Well, the one thing I like about him is he does a lot of good things in his mechanics. Now, everybody, you're right. You're 100% right. 100 miles an hour is not normal. But, he's got a big frame, 6'6". I actually loved that he was throwing a football before his game. I think those are one of the – look, we have not even come close to perfecting how to keep pitchers healthy. Matter of fact, I could do a whole show on it, and nobody talks about it because they just realize people are going to get hurt, and it's a financial model that analytics is running their whole grid on. But what I hope we don't do is just be so obsessed with amount of pitches or the amount of innings. You've got to let your eyes, you've got to be able to watch a guy. If he's not having a lot of stress, if he's repeating his mechanics, a lot of good things can happen. And, he's big, he's strong, and I'm crossing my fingers, because I know the rhetoric out there is, well, when's the date going to be, that he has his Tommy John, which drives me crazy. So I'm hopeful that he'll be pitching for a while.
And we've accepted Tommy John as if that comes along with the position. I mentioned a story, a physical therapist that I work with. He works with major leaguers, and he had two separate situations where parents of their son, and they were both teenagers, they wanted to have Tommy John surgery before they needed Tommy John surgery. And it's gotten crazy, John, that you go in and it's basically, your 50,000-mile checkup with your car. It's like, yep, you're going to need Tommy John. All right, we'll see you in a year. How did we get here?
Yeah. Well, it's the best and worst thing that's ever happened to this sport. I think we're approaching the 50-year anniversary of Tommy John. And, it was so important to me that I spent time in my Hall of Fame speech to try to address this matter. And since then, nobody's paying attention. Doctors have tried their best to disprove all these different myths that are out there about the Tommy John surgery. It was never intended for 12-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds, never. And that's, to your point, it is a byproduct of, I call it a hypnotism of people just talking about something so much that you end up believing it. And if you talk about it enough, even though it's not true, you'll just buy into the narrative. And that's one of the narratives that is an absolute worst case scenario. Oh, you'll be fine. Look at this guy. Look at John Smoltz. Look at this guy. It's so false, but yet people have had enough evidence of the elite pitchers coming back from it that they think it's like a Band-Aid.
Sure.
And, I speak to it every time I can, and I think, it just goes over people's heads. And as I've said, as I've watched more baseball, I'm approaching watching more baseball than I did playing it. I just hate to see these young players in the big leagues. Look, there will be another Tommy John recipient that goes in the Hall of Fame. But when I made this statement that there won't be, because I saw this epidemic and people are having 2 of them and 3 of them in the big leagues. Just think about that. That one is bad enough, and 1 should save your career. 2 should not be more of the conversation we're talking about. And so the reason there will be another Tommy John recipient in the Hall of Fame is because there's going to be so many of them that sooner or later you're going to get one of those that has had the career long enough to be able to. This was supposed to be later in your career, not to start your career. And here's the other thing. There hasn't been many pitchers that have lasted more than 7 years to date on a Tommy John recovery. And that's the one thing that we will have to see as it plays out, if that becomes some of the benchmarks for the length that it takes a Tommy John before they have another one.
He's John Smoltz, the Hall of Famer, on the call for the All-Star game last night. Then he had Mason Miller come in, 5th inning. John, he was throwing almost 104.
Yeah, I mean, they've mastered – look, again, it's the definition of insanity. They've mastered the ability to throw hard. There's no doubt about it, but they have not even come close to be able to match the health with it. And hitting is way beyond the ability to match this velocity that they're teaching. You have to sacrifice something to throw that hard. And we all know what that is. That's sacrificing length of your career and sacrificing command. But when you see a young man that looks pretty effortless throwing the ball the way he does, all I can think of, because it is the Oakland A's, and they are notorious for trading these kind of players for a plan that nobody is able to figure out yet, the amount of players that normally a closer would demand is not that high. He could demand a pretty good package if they decide to trade him to a contending team. But
he's going to be traded. They're just certain.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the
guys.
Plan that Oakland usually has.
Yeah. You faced a lot of great players. You faced Bonds and McGuire, and we can run down the list here. But when Otani comes to the plate, who does he remind you of?
That's a great question. It's not quite Barry Bonds, of course. Barry Bonds never missed a pitch in his heyday. He didn't get many to hit, and when he got them, he obliterated them. It's kind of a combination, maybe even a hybrid between a Helton and a Bonds. Helton was one of the best pure hitters. I know everyone's going to say he played a lot of it in Colorado, but the swing path and the way that they get to a baseball is similar. And I'm just enamored with the power. Look, Otani has holes. There's no doubt, but he's shored them up. He's only had to concentrate on hitting this year. Imagine, the guy has had a break from pitching, and his power is just so raw. And he goes through little streaks where you're like a Bonds, where you're not getting the ball by him. And then there's times where you can get that down and in, up and in type quadrant. But what an incredible first year of a monster contract that we hope he's going to pitch majority of that contract and play and hit at the same time.
Let's get to the serious topic, the All-Star Game uniforms.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah.
How would you feel wearing that?
Be honest with you, first thing I said when I got to the National League side, they got the better draw. There's no doubt. They got the better draw of the uniforms. I saw Bruce Bochy in that uniform, and I'm like, Boch, and you could just see him. I don't know, man. It has been.
But it's an easy fix.
Somebody thinks that.
Right.
It is an easy fix. I think that's going to be next year in Atlanta. The rumor is I think that's going to be back to wearing the jersey tops of your team Somebody thought it was great. So they, it's like, look, I mean, we all get dressed and get in the mirror, and we're like, man, this is a great outfit. And then somebody sees us and goes, did you get dressed in the dark? So yeah, I thought they were, when I first saw them, I thought it was the BP, kind of like the batting practice. You just go out there and change into something. But no, they didn't.
How many All-Star games? 8?
8. Yeah. And I got in 6 of them, and I had the great timing of giving up 2 runs and getting 2 losses. Those are only 2 runs I gave up. I got 2 losses.
Okay. Would you rather get in and get the loss or not get in an All-Star game?
Probably get in and get the loss. I was fortunate to get 1 win in 96. But there was the craziest scenario in Chicago when I was closing, and I was going to close out that game, and I had 2 of the greatest doing their jobs in Wagner and Gagne pitch the 7th, the 8th, and I was going to pitch the 9th. We had a 4 or 5 run lead. So that's a 100% guarantee that I'm going to pitch. And what unfolded in the 7th and 8th inning, Gagne had never given up a run, yet alone blown a save that year. And both of them ended up giving up some runs, and I was sitting down there, didn't get in. So that was one of them. But yeah, I'd rather probably participate, even if it's, giving up a run to lose the game. The first one I gave up, I was the youngest player to ever get the loss in '89, and Nolan Ryan was the oldest player to ever get the win. So I got that going for me.
Congratulations, John. He's the Hall of Famer. Good to talk to you, John. Thanks for joining us as always.
Great. Same here, Dan.
That's John Smoltz on the call last night. Leave it to me. Let's talk about the negatives of your Hall of Fame career.